Alex, good to see you. Could you introduce yourself and your business?
Hi, Cormac. Yeah, sure. Good to see you too. So I'm Alex Fenton. I'm the CEO of Effer Ventures. We are an operational investor. So we invest capital and time to make businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, better with a view to giving operational efficiency, therefore helping them to grow, and then finding an exit towards the end of that time as well.
Nice. Okay. And how did you get into this space?
So my background, so I ran a lending business. So I was 25 years old and pretty naive. I wouldn't recommend that many 25-year-olds go into lending money to small and medium-sized businesses. It wouldn't be top of my list of things for people to go and start companies doing.
Yeah.
But I did, and we got pretty lucky. We raised some money kind of by chance, and we lent. It was basically factoring. So the mandate was to build a fintech business that lent lots of money and made factoring sexy. And I can promise you that factoring is not sexy, and we lent quite a lot of money. So mission accomplished half, basically. So we did that. We then sold that business just before the pandemic. Again, I always say that's genius by the chief exec and founder, but everyone else seems to think that was just happenstance. So sold that business just before the pandemic into a group called Growth Lending, which still exists today. Was a merger, or kind of an acquisitive merger of GapCap, which is my business, a US business, the UK branch of a US business, and a big kind of global venture debt fund. They came together to offer lots of different things. And then the pandemic happened, which meant that being a lender to SMEs felt incredibly tricky. So it felt like it was a really hard time to be involved. And then suddenly the government started printing money, and it became actually quite an easy time to be an SME lender. Pretty painful in the background, but you were lending lots and lots of money quite quickly, with different risk profile to what you'd been doing for many years. So we did that. We ended up, over the course of my time at GapCap and Growth Lending, we lent £500 million. Yeah, it was good. It was fun. Although I did find out that I was totally and utterly unemployable after merger, which is, I suppose, good to find out at 30 rather than at 50 or 65 or 67. And so, so did that, and then subsequently was in a position where we kind of had a part of that business that kind of I swallowed into running as part of my exit, which is Funding Bay and FBX, which is a debt advisory business, 10k to 20 million, that we advise businesses to raise debt capital. And again, I'm very operationally focused. The group kind of sits atop that. And then we've recently invested in a business that is called the Legends Agency, which is an offshoring business. So we help UK, US, or some Australian, some European businesses to hire staff in South Africa. So offshoring, basically.
Nice. Okay. And what sectors do you predominantly focus in? Still in that like fintech space?
To be honest, yes, we've got some fintech clients on the offshoring. So on the offshoring side of things, yeah, we've got some fintech clients. We get high on our own supply, to borrow a phrase. So we have lots of people in South Africa. I'm sat in our South African office now. Those are not my wine bottles, but they are all South African wines. So we do it ourselves. We've got a few fintechs. We've got lots of recruitment companies. And ultimately, offshoring is. I'm sure you've seen the news recently about graduate roles in the UK basically not being hired for anymore, and everyone seems to be blaming AI. I think actually offshoring is quite a big contributor to that as well. So sort of entry-level jobs, which is a bit of a shame to be honest, but entry-level jobs, sales jobs, marketing jobs, and again, that's sort of not really sector specific. It's across a wide range.
And do you think that's because the quality has dropped in the UK, or the quality's got better elsewhere, or it's just easier? What's your
I
thesis?
just think access, right? I think. So my thesis, if I'm qualified to give a thesis, my thesis would be probably two things. I think the first is that there is an inflection point in terms of cost for any company. And whilst I would like to be sat here promoting British business, using British people to grow British things, ultimately, certainly the narrative around the way the government is increasing national insurance. Your minimum wage should always go up with inflation, but you add that to the national insurance hike, it's much more expensive for people to hire in the UK. You have the cost of living crisis. You have loose theory that there's a level of entitlement around work from home, but you're a graduate, so you kind of need to learn. So how do you manage that, especially if you're an SME? The fact that bigger businesses can afford lots of different benefits and all this sort of stuff, I think means that SMEs are getting to an inflection point where it's pretty expensive to hire junior staff.
Mhm.
And then your second point, or the second kind of theory, is that then you've got access to it. So historically, BPO is not a new thing. I'm sure you've had plenty of phone calls from India offering to upgrade your O2 or EE mobile for many, many years, or you've called the South African call center for British Airways complaining about your lost bag or whatever it might be. So big businesses have always been using offshoring, and now companies like ours are giving access to SMEs because there is a growth of remote working. And so therefore it doesn't, if you're doing Google Analytics, or you're writing blogs, or you are cold calling, or you're sending email campaigns, or you're, whatever it might be, you now can do it as an SME, because we're very happy for you to have one person or have your virtual assistant offshore or whatever it might be. And then of course with South Africa, same time zone, everyone speaks English. There are some mega cultural differences, but a lot of cultural alignment as well. So it's sort of a bit of a perfect storm, I would say.
Okay, no, that makes complete sense. So, getting into this business, the debt lending business, why these two?
Well, debt was a natural progression for me. So we're not actually a lender ourselves. We are an intermediary. So
Okay.
we sit between people who want money and people who have got money. I'm sure you've heard of Funding Circle or IWOCA or
Hmm.
HSBC, like everything from big banks, big high street banks, down to the most alternative of lenders. SMEs don't know about access to capital. Like, there is just no doubt about that. They don't know where to find the money. They don't know what they're looking for. And of course, we were in a business historically, our factoring business, where we were trying to do something a little bit different. So we had a kind of a niche selective invoice financing product, and that meant that not everyone qualified for us. And so having a company that sat alongside, or a department that sat alongside, that said, hey, come one, come all, do you want to raise money? We qualified people for the selective invoice financing, and then anyone that didn't, we farmed out to the rest of the market. That was a relatively natural progression for us, and was literally like a side hustle in the main business. And then with my exit, that became quite apparent that wasn't part of the lending strategy moving forward, as it shouldn't have been in that big business as it became. And so therefore, as I left, I was like, well, can I take this with me? So that was a relatively kind of seamless move, like within intramarket. And then we hired in South Africa a lot in the business that I kind of got bought into, and I realized like the benefits that you could have in big and small businesses was quite extraordinary. Like, some of the people that we hired in South Africa during the course of the pandemic at price points that were great for South Africa, but would make you squirm as paying someone in Britain that money, especially for that kind of quality of individual. The difference you can make by doing that, especially if you're embracing how you work remotely, or how you can manage people remotely, how you can grow teams remotely. I think that was a natural progression for us to kind of take a position in that business, or the business that supplied us, basically, because we felt like we could really make a difference, because the CEO is a force of nature and absolutely brilliant, but didn't have a massive amount of experience of kind of operational, operationally running a business that was, he had landed on a market that was growing so quickly. And I was able to kind of come in and, I suppose, put down the railway tracks to mean that he was an amazing driver of the runaway train on a market that was flying. And so we just kind of laid the tracks. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, and so that makes sense, because it was you experienced how great it is firsthand, and then said, okay, can I get involved? But how do you then decide, or how do you work out that you can come in and operationally add value like that? Do you feel like you've got a framework that you can apply to any business? Do you think it's how do you approach it?
So I'd love to say yes. Be a good headline, wouldn't it? Like 30-step framework to make every business successful. All you got to do is work with me and pay me a shitload of money. No, in short, we had another group, a recruitment group, which we did over 2 or 3 years, where we bought some companies that were, I know you'll read about it on LinkedIn, like kind of people looking for retirement, or founders that had fallen out, or people looking for an exit post-pandemic, where they were like, oh, I've worked really hard for this. It's been here, it's now here. I can't be bothered basically to build it back up again. And I'm 60 years old, or I've fallen out with this guy who's now a pain in the backside because I've just spent the entire pandemic like sat next to him, or whatever it might be. So we bought a few businesses in kind of temporary recruitment. Again, did sort of the bit of a playbook there where we were like, right, rip out lots of maybe old school infrastructure, bring in a lot of technology, offshore lots of things to South Africa and do that. And we sold that business just before Christmas. But I would say that was a real test case for like actually how it's not one size fits all. Even within the 3 companies that we bought there, we ended up having a group and the exit was successful enough. But I think that it was a real tell that it's not, even though they're in the same market, they're basically doing temp recruitment within healthcare, and other sectors. There's no one size fits all to go in and implement change to allow scale. Like it very much is, and so therefore no, we don't go in and just implement one model and one methodology. Like there are bits that we repeat and bits that we try and make sure that the leadership have kind of learned from our mistakes as well. But no, it's not one size fits all at all.
So would you say it's more the resilience and the speed that you move that makes it successful then? If it's
money, like money's quite helpful. I think also just experience. Like I'm not that experienced. I've been 10 years doing running my own businesses, but I've seen a fair amount during that time, especially because we were lending to SMEs. So we've probably funded or been involved in funding across the last 10 years north of £1 billion worth of lending, definitely north of £1 billion worth of lending. We've probably lent to over 10,000 companies. That has probably helped us to build, I don't know how many jobs, 1 million jobs in the UK economy. We don't see those all firsthand because we're a lender or an advisor on that. But you get a real feel for what's working. I mean, in order to lend or to advise a company, you have to see their financials. You have to see what it looks like. You have to get under the bonnet. You have to understand what the business does. And okay, we're now at a scale where I don't see every single one of those businesses. I acknowledge that. But you do get a real feel for what's working and what's not. Like you really do. And I think that we were able to kind of go into, in particular, the offshoring business and be like, you're on a market that's flying. You've got a non-repeatable but good sales methodology. So our job is to make that repeatable. In the healthcare business, we were like, you have a non-successful but quite repeatable sales process. So we were like, probably need to tweak that to make it successful and repeatable. You can go in and kind of operationally, you can see, places where we have cocked up historically, or ultimately lots of businesses are about, if you get to scale, it's about how do you manage data at scale. Ultimately, like we were doing invoice finances. How do I manage lines and lines and lines of data, i.e. invoices, take actions based upon that data at scale, and that's exactly the same when you're advising businesses. How can I get these businesses in and out, at scale? The same with the employer of record services. Each candidate is actually really no different to an invoice, and so I think that there are some methodologies that we can do, but I think learning from our mistakes, having experience, I think also being kind of involved and committed, but not being able to take decisions where you can kind of look at it in the cold light of day. I think as a founder, I was never able to do that, whereas as a kind of, I don't know, I am very involved and I really, really do care, but I think it's not quite the same when you're a founder. Everything has to be kind of hot-headed and it's your baby, and particularly in SME world. And I think we can kind of look at that a little bit more objectively, and maybe also with a bit more patience, I suppose, and structurally. maybe that's, I don't really have a formula is the answer.
That's a good insight. I think what's the, if you're looking at new businesses now, is there ever red flags, things that you think that's a bomb that's waiting to go off, like, and you there any insight that you can share on that?
Yes, there's two actually. The first is that people matter. Like the people matter. And I think that a big lesson I've learned is I bought a business a couple of years ago and kind of rolled it into our recruitment group. And I really liked the person that ran the business, but I knew I couldn't work with them. And I knew I couldn't work with them from the get-go. But because it was like the dumb thing, I kind of negotiated an earn-out. Now, of course, if you negotiate an earn-out with someone you can't work with, guess what happens for that earn-out period? Like, you're screwed, right? And so every change that I would make, and actually, I'm not supposing I'm right or they're right, but they didn't want to work with me. They thought I was like a young upstart, probably got lucky last time, like different. It was just so different. And like, they wanted to run it as a family. I prefer running things as a sports team. Like, you can't sack your family, whereas you can bench a striker. Yeah. And so maybe I was a little bit brutal. And so I think the people matter. So I think that any acquisition, any investment, if you want to be operationally involved, I think you don't necessarily need to go for a pint with them, right? You don't necessarily need to do that, but I think you do have to have, before you enter into that relationship, if we're going to be involved, you have to be able to work together, and you know that pretty quickly. I from my view anyway. And also, where does the balance of power sit? So you need to know that. And then I think the second thing, from our point of view, is that we are operationally intensive. Like, we want to go in and make operational changes to help the business to scale, and you can't be half in, half out on that. And I think that the lessons that we learned from the recruitment group, where you have 3 different companies, we're kind of really in a one, half in on another, sort of let someone else run the other. So, well, how are you ever going to get scale on that if they're not all running the same ops, or at least they're not all bought into the same ops? And so I think our thesis is very much, we're either all in. So we are in, we're making these changes, you're either on the train or you're not, or we are all out, in which case the management team can run that business. And we've got a few kind of silent investments that are sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes ugly, and we don't get involved at all. It's money and money only. And I think that that's a really good lesson, is like, if you want to make loads of changes and you want to contribute, you've got to be able to sit there and do the damn work to do it and have the buy-in of the management team. But equally, if you are going to half be in on that, you've got to be all out. And I think that's a lesson that we've definitely taken, because you can't implement change being half in, half out.
Yeah, fine. No, fair enough. So when you are going all in on businesses, is it predominantly your expertise, predominantly you getting your hands dirty, getting involved? Do you have a team at Effer that you also lean on? How does that look?
Yeah. So we've got a team of about 25 that sit in the middle team, so to speak. That's predominantly HR, operations, finance. Actually, I'm looking at them now. Yeah, they're nice people. 4 people swearing at me. What's going on now? HR, marketing, finance, operations, some analysis that we have, kind of internal side of things. And those are the things that we tend to be like that. The best businesses that we've invested in, both the funding side and the offshoring side, they both haven't had that. So we've been able to go in and be like, well, cool, you want a marketing team, you're kind of sending this to Fiverr, and it's like, cool, we have this, we're going to just plonk it in. And we tend to kind of swap those services for equity, to be honest. Like, we don't charge for it. And so, yeah, we tend to bring those services in. So I've got a great team around me. I've got in the UK, just a world-class kind of head of financial ops who I've worked with she was in the lending business with me, although way more junior in that business, just rising star and just world-class person. And then we have, in particular, a couple of people over here, kind of head of HR or people and culture, who deals with, in her own words, the culture shit. So drives, again, trying to drive the culture through the business. And she's absolutely world-class, even though she's only about 26 years old, but just incredibly talented and incredibly high ceiling. And then I've got a kind of head of business operations that sits over here that sort of pulls all the pieces together. So between the 4 of us, I've got a really solid management team. Basically, they're really good.
Okay, so as you scale, as you take on more businesses, you've got the team ready for that now. What?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all there. We're not at the moment. We're both the two. So we had the recruitment business, offshoring, and the finance business. And I think 3 plays is probably, well, like, we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. Like, in the interest of being all in or all out, it's quite hard to do 3 full-time jobs. So, and at the moment, both those businesses are going pretty well. So, I mean, last year on the offshoring side, I think we grew nearly 700%. We're probably not going to get 700% this year, but I think we'll grow by 5 times, which again, like, is more impressive this year, I'd say, than last year, because you're not quite from a standing start, but it's not a racing lap. Whereas this year will be a racing lap and 5 times growth, which is nice. And on the finance side, we've the manager calls it, he's going for the turkey because it's the double. So three times doubling, which is good. And that wasn't from a standing start. So both of those businesses are going great guns. So I think we would probably look for complementary businesses in those sectors. So maybe a South African recruitment company, maybe a competitive offshoring business to give us a little bit of scale. Potentially on the finance side, there's a couple of products that we're quite weak on. So if we can roll those in, but we're not mega acquisitive at the moment. We're kind of seeing things as and when they come and being quite picky about it. But yeah, I think in the interest of learning the lessons of the recruitment company, where you've got to be all in or all out, basically. We're all in on these, and until they really have got to scale, or we can see an exit in the next 12, 18 months, I think we'll probably sit tight and only buy complementary businesses that will roll into that thing at the moment.
Okay, no fun. And when you are speaking with founders, people that are looking to sell, are they coming to you, or are you going to them?
A mix. We've got horrible brokers that send you an email of every single company that they're possibly trying to sell. So I suppose that's them coming to us. And they will send you an email or a phone call on every business in the world that's trying to sell for a 15x multiple, even though it's the world's most boring entity with no tech. So we'll get lots and lots of them, which tends to be a journey of discovery that actually your business isn't worth 20 million quid. But that's fine. So we get lots of them. We have pretty good networks in the 2 sectors that we're in now. So you tend to get a feel, maybe if you see you tend to get a feel for what's going on. And we will kind of go and be like, hey, is this an interesting conversation? I also quite like acqui-hire, where you get a smaller, maybe a 1-man, 2-man band. Like, we've definitely done that in our kind of recruitment side of things historically. It's like you find a 1 or 2-man band and you really want the person. At the moment, for example, we're looking for a head of department in the employer of record side of things based over here in South Africa, and we're talking to some small 1-man bands over here as to whether potentially we can sort of soak in theirs and they come and lead that business unit for us. So things like that. And we just keep our ear to the ground, to be honest.
Nice. Okay, yeah. So keeping an eye out for the triggers, the signals that people may want to, and then conversation.
Yeah, but non-scientific, basically.
Fine. Okay, cool. So next 12 months, if we're speaking again, what makes it successful for you? So not the goals that the business has set, but for yourself.
So I have a small baby. He's 13 weeks old, and my wife, who is incredibly successful in her own right, has managed to persuade me to spend the entire summer in Canada. Cool. And it would be really nice if that goes well, from a business perspective. I'm obsessive and I always work, and it basically was Canada or Bali, on the basis that my wife was like, well, I don't want you to work, just go on holiday and work. So we are, as of next Friday, we are going to be abroad for 8 weeks. And I really, really trust my management team and the leadership teams within the businesses. Yeah. But I think maybe ask in 3 months. In 3 months' time, from a personal perspective, I think that could be a massive game changer for the business, because it goes from being, can't call it founder-led because I'm not really the founder, but it goes from being kind of chief exec-led business to something where the management team are going to get me for 3 hours a day rather than 16, but 3 hours a day in the evening. It will be very much more, we always bang on about scale, but ultimately scale and culture. But scale and culture really only happen when you're not in the room, and I'm quite excited about that. I'm really nervous about it, but I'm quite excited about it. So if that goes well, it could be a massive game changer for us, because I can then start to think about bigger things in terms of, how can I drive new parts of the business or whatever, rather than being super involved operationally. So that is a big thing for us, and I can't even think towards Christmas now. I'm just trying to get to September.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, yeah. Keep me updated. I think I can't imagine that. Obviously, I'm at an earlier stage of my business journey. I can't imagine being out of the business for that long. So yeah, keep me updated.
Maybe I won't, because you don't want to read about it. It'd be a disaster. No, actually, that makes it sound like I've got absolutely no faith in the people running the business. I do. I have absolute faith. I think the person I don't have faith in is myself.
Yeah.
To just butt the hell out.
Yeah.
Stop sending messages at 4 a.m. UK time, kind of thing. So
yeah.
We'll see.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, thanks for coming on, Alex. Where should people go if they want to reach out, ask any questions? Maybe they're looking to sell their business.
Yeah, LinkedIn is good. So reach me on LinkedIn. If you're looking to offshore staff, the Legends Agency, there's so many brilliant staff in South Africa looking for jobs, complementary to the UK, and I think every business should be thinking about it. I think it's been a game changer for us, and I think it should be a game changer for everyone else, having access to staff at a lower cost, same or often higher quality. So I think that's reach out to the Legends Agency or me on that. And then if you're looking to raise debt capital, you need to speak to people before you need the money. It's the most important thing. And again, us included and most other people, it's a no-win, no-fee service. So, there's no engagement nonsense. There's no fees to pay until you decide to take the money. So I would definitely advise, if you're a business that's thinking about raising debt or thinking about how do I take that next stage of growth, speak to the guys at Funding Bay, or if you're a slightly bigger, FBX Capital. I think, people should do that before they need the money yesterday. Would be a big piece of advice.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks for coming on, and that's the pod.
Awesome. Thank you.